So good morning and welcome to the Really Helpful Club and the latest in our In Conversation series. I'm Sarah Austin, and this is where we shine the spotlight on leading entrepreneurs, experts, business owners, and we shine the spotlight on them to hear about their journey, what inspired them to start their business, and how they've grown that business and some of the lessons that they've learnt along the way. Now, we've spoken to so many different people in the last year, and this morning I'm going to be chatting to Arabella is the founder of a business called Their Best Years. And it's an educational consultancy that's all about, just about to tell everyone, steal your thunder slightly and say what your business is about. But instead, Arabella, I'm going to say good morning to you and welcome. And just say hello to everyone who's tuned in and watching.
Hello. Good morning and thank you for listening.
Well, it's our pleasure. And actually, I know this is an especially busy time of year for you. You know, beginning of an academic year, so many decisions that, parents and, everyone's having to sort of, look after and think about. So thank you to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat to you. And what is really nice, I know we've got lots of people joining us. Lovely comment already saying, so excited to see you both. So thank you, not only to Arabella for joining us, but to everybody else that's tuning in. So look, I was about to describe what Their Best Years is. I'm going to hold off and let you talk about that in just a second. But let's sort of roll back the clock, as it were. Talking to you, I know you've got this really fantastic established business. Lots of people know you and what you do. But let's roll back the clock a bit further to Arabella Davies. You tell us more about you, the inspiration behind you and what you do, and behind the business. It's over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, it was sort of the inspiration, the word inspiration. It was actually more of a sort of evolvement. It's evolved from something very different. I used to be a headhunter in a previous life. And being a headhunter, you're matching the right person to the right job. And when I left headhunting, when my first child was born, I was a sort of stay-at-home mum, and I missed that sort of camaraderie of seeing people, meeting people, getting to know them, the interviewing side of it. And so I set up something called the Interview Experience Workshop, which is now 20 years ago, whereby I started going into schools, assisting sixth formers initially with Oxbridge interviews and their sort of career prospects, whether it was a gap year opportunity or going straight into the workplace. And that sort of evolved very quickly into other schools saying, could you come and help us with workshops throughout of all the year groups, inspirational workshops, entrepreneurial workshops. And then before I knew it, I was going into prep schools, helping the younger children with their senior school assessments and interviews. And so I built this business over about sort of a 10-year period, going into schools day in, day out. I was running them in the schools mainly, sort of running these workshops. I'd meet all sorts of children, all sorts of staff, going to all sorts of schools all over the country and abroad, actually. And it made me realise that I was getting a really good knowledge into all these schools. And before I knew it, I was the sort of go-to person for my friends to say, oh, we're thinking of this school. Have you been in? What did you think of it? And I was able to sort of give them some sort of very different advice. It was more, well, actually, I don't know if your child would thrive in that type of school. It's a bit more like this, or it's a bit more like that. And obviously, all schools have got lots to offer and they're very different, but they are very different. And sometimes it is important to match the right child with the right school, a bit like my headhunting. And before I knew it, Their Best Years had sort of grown. And in fact, it was one of my first clients, my first Their Best Years clients in Hong Kong. Her name is Alex Hawkins. I wonder if she might be listening. And if so, I want to commend her with that, because she was the one that came up with the name. She was my first Their Best Years client. In other words, I did the whole service with her. She was my sort of guinea pig. She was an expat in Hong Kong, wanting to send her children over here to board from the age of 8, actually. So I was doing the prep school journey for her. I was doing the senior school journey. I was doing everything. She came up with the name. She was actually a very integral part in the baby stages of Their Best Years. And so I owe a lot to her, in fact. I then took it on from there, and most of my clients are English. I have a handful of expats and a few overseas families who want to come and either live in England or are sending their children over to board. But the majority of my families live in England. They are mainly London and sort of around the home counties, but I also have a few in Yorkshire and Scotland. And they are just really wanting some help with their schooling. And so that is where I am, 20 years on, and here we have their best years. And it's being their best years, it's rather nice, because should be your children's best years, hence the title.
Thank you for sharing that, because it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I think I mentioned to you when we were chatting earlier this week, I think you are my 32nd or 33rd interviewee. And so, and actually this stuff just gets better and better and better. I love hearing these stories, because learning about, you know, for some people it's a light bulb moment, for other people, as you say, it's an evolution. And this is really pulling together a combination of what was, you know, naturally good skills that you have and you've honed and developed over the years, but with something that is clearly a passion that it was inside you and was lit up, you know, by the journey of, you know, launching your own business and sort of bringing it together and being able to help families in this way. So thank you, because I think, you know, we run this series as both a way of helping people who are thinking about starting their own business, but also sharing some of the insights and wisdom and tips, you know, from you as an expert. And I think for someone who's, you know, from that business owner perspective, it's quite interesting. You know, it's perhaps to drill down what skills do you have, what have you liked in a previous career life, as it were, that you can then bring into your life as you know, as you are now for this next chapter. And I think you're a really sort of glowing example of how you can do that and bring it to life and turn it into a very successful business and be something that is really making a big difference and impact on people's lives. Now, we're joined by quite a lot of people. Lots of people have been waving and saying hello, so thank you very much for everyone that's doing that. But actually, what I'd like to do is turn it back on you as followers and people who are in our audience. Is, you know, this is your chance either to, you know, pop a comment in if you have used Arabella and her services, you know, at any point during the years, or if you've got a burning question, because we know this is absolutely a really important time of year to to be gathering your thoughts together, to be working out what you want to know about schools and how you should be thinking about the process of where next for your child. So this is your golden moment to be able to, you know, ask the expert. And actually, as if on cue, I've got a lovely comment here that says, "I wish Arabella had been around when my children were young. It was tough choosing schools and there's no manual." So true, isn't it? I mean, there's no manual for being a parent, full stop. And actually, this is one of those incredibly important decisions. So there's the inspiration, there's the journey to where you've landed now. But tell us a little bit more about their best years, and and if you can, to share what makes it different.
Oh, well, thank you. I suppose what really makes it different is that I am very keen that parents are in the driving seat for this journey. There are lots of sort of services that offer doing the whole lot, I suppose, everything, including filling in registration forms and doing everything, which is helpful for those living abroad. But actually, the majority of my clients are familiar with the education system. My expertise lies mainly within the independent sector. And most of my clients are familiar with it. They didn't necessarily go to the same similar schools, but they know what they're doing. They know what they're looking at. But yet at the same time, they want to do it, but they haven't got the confidence. And I suppose what I do is I reassure them along the way, but very much enhancing, and I must say this actually openly, is that I enhance what an existing head will do. You know, prep schools are very, very well versed in what they do. They know what they're doing, but they don't have the time, particularly following this pandemic. Any head, whether it's a prep school or a senior school, has got their work cut out for them, and particularly for the junior schools and prep schools, their cake is pretty tight. It's tight in that tin. And if they've got to deal with all the admissions, of course they lead and guide the parents. But what I've got, where I'm different, is I've got the time. I can dedicate my time to the family right from the beginning. And I help them. Initially, I start by having a sort of lovely sort of conversation with them. I find out not just about their child, usually they come to me with one child saying we're looking for a school for X child. But I say, actually, I want to hear about all your children, whether they've gone through school or not, however old they are, even if they're still a baby in a crib. I want to know about their family setup. I want to know about them as parents. What do they do for a living? What are their aspirations for their children as a whole? Where did they go to school? What was their education like? And actually, what's interesting is I often say, one of the questions I send all my families a little questionnaire, and I say, what sort of education did you have? And do you want to reflect this with your children's? And 50% of parents come back and say, yes, I loved school and I want exactly the same for my children. And literally 50% come back and say, no, I want completely the opposite. And it is interesting that, and that's important to me. And that again is where existing heads don't have the time to find that out. Also,
Bella, just you've lost your Bella. Just rewind about 10 seconds because we lost your sound, and I know what you're sharing right now is really important. So, so just start that sentence again. Sorry to interrupt your flow, but it's too important. This.
Yes, it's finding out about the family as a whole. Children, some families have children at different schools, and what I do is I say, right, you've got one child at this school and one child at that school, but you want them to end up in the same senior school, and that again is where an existing prep head they can't possibly have time to factor in all the children in your family, and that's, I think, my uniqueness. It's all about the family as a whole, and it's taking them through, it's guiding them. As I said in the beginning, they're in the driving seat. But I'm the mechanic on the side of the road that if they break down or have a problem, I'm the AA van that drives up and says, right, what can I do to help? And I'm there all the way through this journey, holding their hand, reassuring them and giving them the confidence to perhaps do something a little bit different. It's sometimes quite nice to steer off the beaten track. Everybody, if you live in a particular area, there are certain schools that everybody goes to because obviously location is very important, but you might want to relocate yourself as a family. You might want to do something a little bit different. You might have a child that perhaps needs a little bit extra than the schools that are on your doorstep, whether it be sport or music or in the classroom with learning support. And again, I can really help with that because I'm all over the country. I specialise in schools everywhere. And as I say, also in Europe and overseas. And I think that's what's really important, is to find the right fit. And with people's busy lives, parents are busy. Most of my families, both parents are working, and they need someone to be able to sort of alleviate the stress, because it's very stressful. It's a really stressful day, and it shouldn't be, actually. One of the ones I hope I achieve with my families is to reassure them that actually this should be a fun adventure, because if you embrace it as a family, then your children will also embrace it and enjoy the ride. It should be an enjoyable ride. And I also think it's about giving them the confidence to do something a bit different, reassure them that all will be well and that their children will get to the right school at the end of the day. There's no such thing as a child wearing a placard, walking down the King's Road, with the placard saying, I've got no school to go to. If anyone has seen that, do please send a message through. I personally haven't seen that. So I suppose that's it in a nutshell of my uniqueness and the difference. And I suppose it's that confidence thing. It's reassuring parents every step of the way and saying, it's going to be fine. You're going to do this. And not everybody's journey works out initially. But at the end of the day, your child usually does end up in the right place, which is lovely to see. It's so important.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And there are so many things that came out of that I think just reinforces this comment that has been shared by someone who's clearly used your services and clearly benefited from them. Arabella has been supremely helpful. She made such a difference, and I can't think of anyone more knowledgeable. I couldn't concur with her more. And it's so interesting, Arabella, because it is, I think it's that point you make about the whole family. And this is where you absolutely can work in partnership with schools, in partnership with the parents. This isn't this isn't just a sort of a decision that's sort of left to someone on their own, or it's got to be made in the context of a whole family, because that's how you find the right fit. The right school as opposed to the best school. It's got to be the right school that fits Absolutely. With your family. Absolutely. And as you say, leads to a happy experience as an entire family. But the other thing that really struck me when you were talking, and we've heard this over and over again. I know we've got Katie Totham on the listening in as well, who is an outstanding events planner, is this concept, or this idea of the importance of taking the stress away, making it an enjoyable experience. And that's exactly what we were picking up from Katie when we chatted a few weeks ago about her business. And as you say, something that begins as can be an overwhelming experience, it can be a difficult point, and actually helping and guiding people. And this is something that we we at Really Helpful Club are all about. It's helping people through those transition stages in their life, and helping people navigate their way, find their way forward, find that expert resource to help make it, an easier, happier, fulfilling experience, and absolutely, in your words, taking that stress away. So thank you for that. And that brings me on to my next question, which is, for any parent that's watching, whether you're in the throes of this or have gone through it previously, we all know that selecting a school is one, time consuming, potentially stressful, and for anyone in the independent sector, it can be one of the most important financial decisions that a family will ever make. And as you say, the sort of the ripple effect, the consequences on the family as a whole is immensely important. So, maybe you could share with us some of the key things that our parents are asking you about. What's the number one thing that a parent comes to you and said, this is the thing I'm really worried about. Help me bust through this, and that will help me, clear my mind and make the decision between A and B, or how to begin my search. So, what are some of the stuff that parents are talking to you about, worried about, interested in?
I think the most important one, and I think it's probably the obvious one, it's the assessment, exams and interviews, the entrance. How is my child going to get in? And I think that has become a massive issue. And I think all the schools are aware of that as well, particularly in London, where the assessment and exam process is actually brutal, is a good word of describing it. And I think many parents get extremely stressed, and it's a very infectious stress, because that quickly infects onto your children, who then get very stressed about the exams. I think there's possibly, if I'm not speaking out of turn, a bit too much tutoring going on. And what can happen, it sort of leads on, one person says, oh, I've got a French tutor on a Wednesday, and before you know it, the other person's got a maths tutor on a Monday and a Wednesday. And suddenly you've got children being tutored sort of every day in various subjects at the age of sort of 8. And that is hard, because you as parents, you don't want to keep up. You sort of think, well, I don't want my child to get left behind. So you can see how easy it is for it to be a really stressful time for them. What I would say, though, how I reassure parents is, look, they have to have some form of selection process. I think in London, it's particularly difficult because, London's run out of space. So therefore, they've run out of places to put schools, and therefore there are too many children. And as a result, there's a lot of exodus of London families sending their children outside of school, which I'm sure you yourself, appreciate that situation. What I say to parents, though, is that, these exams and assessments and interviews are there really to qualify that your child is the right fit. You don't want your child in the wrong school. Yeah. So, my advice is to, part of my service is I hold a family's hand from, registration right through the assessments and examinations. I help prepare them. I'm a great believer in sensible preparation, but I'm not a believer in over-coaching. But it's about just getting your child ready, exam and assessment ready, which is very key. So that is probably the biggest stress of all. The next stress, I suppose, is if I'm doing it in a pecking order, is what happens if my child gets to the school that I want them to get to, and then when they get there, they don't like it, or want to leave, or something goes wrong. And that, again, is it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And again, I say to parents, well, so what? If it does happen, which it might, I obviously hope it doesn't, and it doesn't happen often, I really will do stress that. But if it does, then you can move. You can change direction at any time. And that is what I think has really changed in a generation of school planning. Back in our days, I'm sure you'll appreciate, Sarah, you went to a school and your parents probably said, well, first of all, they didn't really look at very many schools. It was just like, well, we'll go and see 2, and that looks nice, off you go on the first day, and there's your uniform. And, if you went wrong, your parents sort of said, oh, well, never mind, you're there for 7 years. And we sort of did slightly sort of lump it and put up with it. But I think, life was a bit different back then. Now, it is important to know that you can change direction. Very important that you can change direction. The next thing, I suppose, is there's too much choice. Back to what I said, our parents probably went to see me. I know my parents didn't even go and see the school that I went to see. They sort of thought, well, that looks nice. My grandmother had gone there in 1920. And so guess what? Off I went. And actually, it was a great success. I loved it. But I think that now, you are encouraged to go and visit at least 5 schools. You're encouraged to register with at least 3, at least in London. I mean, I've been helping families this current year who, one family registered with 13 schools. Oh. And, that is quite tough. Back to my word, brutal, for the child. But I think there's almost too much choice. And again, I try and you know, part of my unique service is to draw up a list of target schools and then say, right, let's knock off 5. You don't need to go and visit 13 schools, but I think it would be a good idea to visit at least 3. And if you can be bothered and have the energy, go and look at 5. What has changed in the pandemic is that online tours and visits, which are still active on in fact, by every school website. So you can get a very good feel now from the website, whereas before it was just a photograph of a girl playing hockey and a boy playing rugby. Now, you know, you really can get a speech from the headmaster and a sort of a virtual tour, which gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, is this the right school? Where is it located? Is it in a town? Is it on a campus? You know, all this sort of thing. And that, I think, has helped. But it is hectic, you know, these open days, which I know that many of my listeners and listening in today might be going for. You know, there's this next 3 weekends are big weekends in most of the leading boarding schools, for example, with open days, and they're hectic. You know, you've got up to sort of 800 parents going along at once. The London schools are just about to have their Saturday open mornings for the 11 plus. You know, they're all quite hectic, and you know, it's very overwhelming, and that can be stressful. So that's probably the 3 top areas of anxiety. And then of course there's location. If you're in London, that's less of an issue because, you know, most of the schools are accessible by bus or train or tube. But outside of London, you know, if you've got children of different ages, are there going to be different pickup times? If I'm going to have to pick up one at 3:30 and one at 5 and one at 7, you don't want to live an hour away. The other one as well is boarding. A lot of parents are anxious about boarding. Do I want my child to board? In fact, there are very few full boarding schools left. Most of them are now weekly boarding schools, that's harder for my overseas families who want a full boarding community because they're living in Hong Kong or Dubai or America. And actually that's quite hard because there are really only probably you know, you can count on 2 hands the really full boarding schools where literally nobody goes home at weekends. So I think those are the main anxieties that my families have, and I hope that what I provide is that reassurance along the way that, yeah, I'm not a magician, I can't alleviate every anxiety. What I can do is hold their hand so that if I think something's going wrong, I can sort of jump in and go, okay, let's change direction. I think maybe this isn't going to work out or swing in the right direction. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, I suppose.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I always say to you, Arabella, I can listen to you all day. I mean, these are really big decisions, and yet they're not at the end of the day, in as much, you know, get it right and move on, as you say, and don't over fixate on it. But in order to do that, you need a roadmap, is I think what you're saying. And it's about taking the right sort of, you know, forks in the road and knowing who to come to and how to access that, you know, that great expertise. So, you know, and sort of go back to one of the comments earlier in our chat where the person who was joining, I can't remember who it was, who said, I just wish I'd had Arabella when my children were younger. And absolutely, I mean, just to be able to pull on that, you know, that information, that expertise, and if nothing else, you know, narrowing it down from 13 schools down to, you know, whatever number it is that you should visit, you know, a piece of advice in itself, and then working out which ones to go to. Because we all know when we go to these schools, they're on their best behaviour, they present amazingly well, and you sort of come out wanting to go to all of them. I remember coming out, not even my children, I wanted to go to all of them. And so it's a minefield of information and fear and so forth. And I think, you know, given the year that, you know, the 18-month period, you know, this thing goes on and on and on, you know, the experiences that we've gone through in the last year, perhaps you could talk about how you've adapted to the changing needs of parents and, you know, some of the learnings that you've gone through.
Yes, that's such an interesting question. I think I have gone through quite a big learning curve. I think what has changed for me this year is that whereas I was able to enhance what a prep school head might offer, particularly this is obviously for senior school selection, the prep school heads haven't been available. You know, they'd be able to come to me and say, oh, I bumped into my head on the touchline watching a hockey match on Saturday, and he suggested X school. You know, what do you think? That hasn't been able to happen because, you know, they haven't been at school. And you know, if you have been at school, you haven't been able to go anywhere near anybody. The social distancing requires that you can't even say hello to your prep school head, really. So I think, you know, that has been a tough year. And therefore that has meant that I've had to really step up and take the place a bit of a head in some ways on their advice, obviously not as a headmaster or a headmistress, but just as the sort of advice that I think, okay, what would, I know a lot of the heads. What's lovely as part of my job is going around these schools. I try a week and I try and meet the head, particularly of the prep schools. And I think, you know, what would that head say? I know that head. What would I think that head might be advising this family? Because I want to keep it, you know, on the same level. And I think that's really important. Sorry, Sarah, you were going to say something. Oh, I've lost you actually. Have you lost
No, I
me?
was about to say that we were just starting to lose your Wi-Fi, and it came back in just in time. So I don't want to interrupt your flow.
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you still hear me? Is it going all right? We've had a bit of a problem.
We've got you.
In this village.
We've got you. So I don't want to interrupt your flow. No, we haven't missed a thing. So keep going.
What was I saying? I've now completely lost my train of thought. What was your question again?
Well, it was missing. Well, let me cut in then. It's missing. Yeah. It's missing those touch points. But actually, I think the point you're making is so interesting, because it doesn't matter, who we're talking to, what business owner we're talking to. Actually, I think the thing that we've all missed and we're all craved and we're all, really rather excited with anticipation and desperate to get back to is those real life touch points with people. And and what you were talking about then was just standing in that sort of that go between, as it were, because as a parent I can't have I can't have that just quick chat with the head about this and that, whatever. And we know that those are some of the best ways to pull that that great information. So obviously this is an amazing consultancy, amazing business, amazing service that you're offering people. But we're also, the point of these chats we have is to shine the spotlight on you as a business owner. So, you've launched Their Best Years, you've grown and evolved this into a really, fantastic business that I think has incredible reputation. Everyone I've ever come across that knows you or has used your services, they cannot recommend you more highly or speak about you, more enthusiastically. But as a business owner, and in the context of the consultancy, what do you find most rewarding about running the business?
Actually, I've sort of been running my own business now for 20 years in sort of two guises, really, with the interview experience workshop and obviously now sort of 7 years with Their Best Years. And I would say it's definitely being able to manage my own time. I'm a night owl. I was always hopeless at sort of getting across the city at sort of 7 o'clock, having to be at my desk at 7:30. I mean, that to me was a complete killer. And I love the fact that, I don't have to do that and I can work, but I do work until often most evenings until sometimes midnight. That the downside of that is that, you tend to work 7 days a week, as when you run your own business, there's never any let up. But I just love the feeling of, particularly as my own children, who were my babies once upon a time, are growing up and flying the nest. It's like, well, I've still got a baby at home. I've still got my business. Their Best Years is very much my business. And that's what's really important. I'm so sorry. Is my internet really bad?
It's cutting in and out. So we're not losing the spirit of what you're saying, and it's good enough. But it's too important what you're saying. But we don't want to lose. Oh no, that is better, Arabella. So don't Yes.
I'm going to see if it's any better.
I'm
going to move
near my router. It's so insightful what you're sharing that we don't want to lose it. But I also don't want to interrupt you.
I'm just going to move you. It's all right. We can be on the move. That's the bliss of Instagram and social media and life in this digital age, is that we can move about. I can go anywhere I like.
You are. This is the authentic self. And I feel like we're also doing a sort of through the keyhole as well with you. And
it is exactly
so. But actually, what you've just said is so interesting again, because it comes up over and over again from the business owners that we talk to. Is this this extra baby that you have, and and that you nurture it, you love it, you never quite put it down, as it were, but this desire for control over what you do and everything else is it's a passion. It's a real passion. And again, together with so many other people I've chatted to, it's infectious. And this is why, we want to encourage anyone who's sort of sitting on the sidelines going, I want to take the leap, but I just don't quite have the confidence to do it. You are testament of go for it. It
Absolutely.
Takes time to, and so with that, what advice would you give to someone starting their own business or taking that leap?
I would say to be brave. And I think, don't necessarily, obviously one's got to have a viable business plan, particularly if you need to borrow money off a bank or something like that. That I totally appreciate. Yeah. but it's also having the element, knowing that there will be an element of surprise along the way. And
Yes.
you don't know how a business is going to evolve. You have an idea. You might have a product. You think you know what you want to do, but actually what you need to do is have the idea, be brave, make the leap, and don't worry about what the end result might be. You might end up thinking you're going to sell your product online and end up opening a shop. You might decide that you're going to start a consultancy with just you and end up within 2 years employing 10 people. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just having that bravery to not know what the end result might be. I mean, you know, let's look at Sir James Dyson, who started off with a wheelbarrow. And did he really think when he started the wheelbarrow in 1975 or whatever it was, that he was going to be doing hand dryers and hair straighteners? I mean, probably not. It probably wasn't on his agenda at that particular moment. But look where he is now. I mean, he must be one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time, particularly in this country. And I just think that that's what it's all about. It's being brave. And I had the best advice. I don't think this listener's going to be listening in because she can't. But I've got a friend called Annette. And I want to sort of flag her up because she was my inspiration years ago when I sort of said, I don't know where my business is going and I don't know what's going to happen. And she said, why are you worrying? Let it be and let's see what happens. And I bet you somehow an opportunity will suddenly throw it itself at you, or you'll have an idea and it will evolve. And literally she couldn't have been more right, because suddenly this evolved from the company I had, and it's grown, and it's, you know, what started off as a very sort of small little business and I was doing it very part-time. I'm now, you know, doing it full time as a sort of consultancy that's known. You know, I've got clients in Hong Kong. I've got a call tomorrow actually with 2 clients in Australia. I've got Japan, Korea. I go to the Middle East, Thailand, and then over on to the US and Canada. And that's really exciting. I love having, although, you know, many of them are English and wanting, particularly my Asian clients are wanting to come back now, so that's really great. But it's watching it grow, and it's so exciting. And that's one of my biggest advice would be: don't think too deeply, just jump, because you know what, you'll land somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and actually that is it in a nutshell. So anyone that's watching, either now or when we're going to share this on IGTV later, just do it. You know, see where it goes. And so thank you, because as I said, you know, your enthusiasm is infectious, your energy is invigorating, and your journey is inspiring. So, you know, so thank you for that. So look, just, you know, a couple of quick last questions, because, you know, we've been on half an hour, and, you know, it's been fantastic. You've shared so much, but I guess what's really important, you know, as a parent watching, you know, it's been a very long, very difficult year. So much disruption. You know, we talk about the curveball like no other that's hit us as a society, as families, as business owners, and stuff. But for young, it's been, you know, tough, like nothing else. So here we are, the beginning of a new academic year. I sense there's a feeling of optimism. You know, perhaps there's a little bit of muted optimism, but there is a sense of perhaps these children can enjoy something that's a bit more like normal, whether it's getting back to sport, schools won't get locked down again. And so what advice do you have to share as we embark on this next academic year?
Well, I think that's just such a good question. And you know, who knows what's going to happen next. But I pray that there will be no more huge school disruptions, and certainly no school closures from what I'm gathering. But, you know, obviously who knows, but let's hope that doesn't happen. But I also think that our children need support at whatever age they are, whether they've just started in reception, whether they're going into senior schools, they've just started in year 7 or year 9 at senior schools, or whether they're sort of coming out the other end and they've got exams ahead of them. And I think there is going to be a bit of disruption, I sense, with the exams next year. I cannot believe that with all the school that many children have missed, that they're going to be back to what they were pre-pandemic. And as a result, there will be at some point probably an announcement on what we're going to do next with A-levels and GCSEs. And I think it's very easy for us parents, when this announcement comes, to go, oh God, this is an ongoing nightmare. But actually that is the wrong message, because there's nothing we can do about it. And we've got to just as parents, find the silver lining. And yes, it's annoying. Of course, it's really annoying. But I think in front of our children, whatever stage they are, we need to be seen to be supportive, that it's all going to be all right, that everyone's in the same boat. And actually, all these little hurdles and bumps, you know, it is only going to develop a bit more resilience in all of us, and particularly in our children, which, as we know, going out into the workplace, which is why we're educating them, is to launch them into the workplace as confident young adults. Now I've got to turn that off. It's all go.
This is what I love about these. These
I
are
know,
the real.
exactly. Who knows what's going to happen next?
Are you going to have a? You going to have a Waitrose like in a cardio delivery?
Probably in a cardio delivery any second. But I think it's you know, back to this. It's supporting our children with, because who knows what's going to happen? Whether the phone's going to ring or the cardio delivery is going to come. We don't know what's going to happen, and we've just got to show our support to our children. And if we are negative as parents and sort of down in the mouth, you know, actually it really does infect on them. You know, it's a very infectious stress, and I think it isn't going to be, you know, GCSEs and A levels. I think I'll be very surprised if they're as they should be. So therefore, let's be prepared for that. Let's not be down in the mouth. Let's say, okay, well, come on then, let's see what's going to happen. I've got a vague idea of what they're thinking of doing with the exams, but you know, we don't know for certain yet. And I think it's just about support and being positive. And you know, look, it is all going to be all right in the end. You know, they're all going to be fine. It's just there's going to be a few, potentially a few more bumps along the way.
Yeah, inevitably, which is, you know, what the news is telling us. So look, my last question is this. Look, you know, you've talked about this journey. It's been a great ride so far. You've talked about how you started this as almost a bit of a hobby. It's grown and it's almost become, you know, sort of success in its own right. Sort of, you know, freewheeling, because you just give such great advice. Everyone wants to come to you for that. But look, we all know as business owners, we've gone through a pretty extraordinary 18 months. If you have that, you know, that ability to look forward, what do you see for your own business for the next 18 months and beyond? If you want to go further in what do you want to share?
Oh gosh, I think I quite like the element of surprise. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know what's around the corner, because I'm in education and schools, because they've been the most affected by this pandemic and constant changes. I think that we've all got to have an element of surprise, because I think there will be a few, sadly, annoyingly, hopefully positive ones as well, but a few maybe not so positive surprises along the way. I think I'd love to see my client base grow a bit more. I you know, what I have noticed with this pandemic is that there's been, you know, lots of schools in all categories have not necessarily been able to respond well to the pandemic and bring in a good enough remote program for their pupils. And what has happened is that I've had a lot of parents ringing me at literally the last minute saying, look, actually, this hasn't worked. Can you please find another school today? And I've had that. That's not just this term. I've had it a bit this term, but mainly sort of this time last year, when they'd had that summer term with that, you know, closure, and the remote learning wasn't up to scratch in many schools. And so I've had that. And I think what I'd like to see is in a way, I don't want obviously parents wanting to leave schools for negative reasons, but I think it's also, what I like is that parents are getting more confident to ring me up and say, actually, perhaps this isn't working. Can you help me formulate another plan at the 11th hour? And I find that quite exciting. I quite like that. So I'd like to see, you know, parents coming to me and asking my advice for that. I'd like to see it growing across the globe. I mean, I'm thinking of possibly traveling to Switzerland and looking at a couple of schools for and maybe other places in Europe, and being able to advise on schools overseas. But just really, I love to sort of the excitement and hope that families will still come to me. And you know, most families will present a different problem or a different anxiety, and I love being able to provide a solution. So I suppose that's really it in a nutshell, is just being able to help as many people as I can with their school plan, so that we get it right for each of their children, and that's key.
Arabella, it has been a joy. I'd like to ask you to come back and do this again in a few months' time, because
well, I love that, and I apologise. I hope the phone doesn't ring and the Wi-Fi doesn't crash and all the sorts of things I just, you know, typically
this is why we do this on Instagram, because it's so much fun. You never know who's going to be at the door next, and so
exactly.
So please come back and do it another 6 months.
I love that.
Well, as you say, who knows what is around the corner, and so it's imparting that sense of, you know, support, expertise, and ability to be resilient through this thing. And you are full of that in spades. I mean, as ever, I've written down what I'd say. It's not just a notebook, it's a whole sort of file of what you've shared. But I guess there are two things, if I can read my writing, that really come out. And so that any parent watching this who is just wondering about their journey, you know, this is why they need to contact you, Arabella Davies, at Their Best Years. You are here to hold their hand, reassure them, and give them the confidence to alleviate that stress and help them to enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. Spot on. That's exactly it. That's what I hope I do.
Absolutely, and in space. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you for that lovely comment that I think just concludes this, which is, this has been wonderful. Thank you both so much. Well, it's our pleasure. This is why we do these things. But we will share this on our IG channel. We'll then load this onto our website, on the Really Help the Club website. We will also share this on the other social media channels, get this into one of our newsletters. So look, if you've enjoyed this, there is no excuse to keep this to yourself. You need to share this onward, you know, both to get people to come and look at Really Help the Club and see what we're doing, but also for any parents you know out there who are just embarking on the journey, agonizing about the journey. Arabella Davies is the person you need to be in touch with. So Arabella, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for joining us.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.